Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're going to be talking about the brand new revealed combat patrol for the Astra Militarum. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. Alright, so we recently had the World Championships of Warhammer from Games Workshop, and in their preview show they revealed that there's going to be a brand new Astra Militarum combat patrol. So we're going to take a look at what's in that new combat patrol. We're going to compare it to the old combat patrol, because for many people they may find that suddenly the Astra Militarum combat patrol we used to have is a little bit better than people were giving it credit for. And while that doesn't mean that the new combat patrol isn't good, we're going to compare the value composition and make sure that everybody is well aware of what they could have, what they're going to be getting, so they can make an educated decision on whether or not they want the old one, the new one, or both.
And, excitingly enough, there's a brand new combat patrol as well, called Drayden's Lance, which sees Rough Riders of Attila charging into battle, backed up by Kasrkins and a command squad, which is great.
Yeah, this is an incredibly flexible combat patrol. Because as you said, those Rough Riders give you a huge amount of speed, and the Kasrkins form a really nice solid centre.
It's a really nice start for an army as well. If you're thinking about starting Astra Militarum, don't forget the current Astra Militarum combat patrol is still good to use as well, so don't worry about that.
Alright, so that is our first look at the new Astra Militarum combat patrol, and we would presume that that's going to be replacing the existing combat patrol, both of which will still have rules and be usable in Warhammer 40,000 combat patrol, but it's safe to assume that the old combat patrol will be going away for purchase ability. So according to Games Workshop, that new Lance combat patrol is going to have one command squad, 2 squads of the Attilan Rough Riders, and then 1 squad of Kasrkins as well. And now here we have the existing combat patrol, Astra Militarum, and this was also the exact same contents of the Cadia Stands box set. That box set had the old codex in it as well, as it was released previously in the last edition, but that later turned into the current combat patrol. So we know the existing combat patrol range is priced at $168, and unfortunately the current combat patrol is sold out online, but there's still plenty of these around the world on store shelves or available online, so you very much still have the opportunity to pick one of these up if you are interested. So the existing combat patrol has 2 of the field guns that come in a single pack normally. It has 1 of the Astra Militarum Sentinels, which can either be built as the Scout Sentinel or Armored Sentinel. And then we have 2 squads of 10 Cadians, and then also a Cadian Command Squad. So the current box set has 28 models and is a pretty decent start for the Astra Militarum army. Now, typically most people would say that this should have at least 1 tank in it. I do agree it would have been really nice to see a Leman Russ or something like that in it, but unfortunately that is just not the case. So $168 for this bad boy. Overall, pretty decent composition with 28 models. It lacks an individual character model, but it does have a command squad, which includes a character. The command squad can be attached to either 10, or if you put all 20 of the Cadians together, it can lead a 20-man squad. And then you have the Sentinel, which can either be a Scout Sentinel or Armored Sentinel if you want a little bit more weapon and durability out of it, as opposed to the speed. And then you have your field gun armament as well, which can be built in any of the 3 different configurations. So you have a little bit of heavy punch, you have some scout ability, you have some potential for indirect fire, you have a decent amount of actual troops, bodies on the ground, and then you have the command squad to issue some orders. So pretty decent composition, pretty decent model count. Let's take a look at the value inside the box set. So your HQ choice inside the box set is going to be the Cadian Command Squad. That is $45 for these 5 models. A couple of specialty troopers, and this is going to be issuing your orders, which are an integral part of the Astra Militarum rules, allowing you to buff up some of your other units, giving them orders for either extra speed, shooting, durability, or a multitude of other choices. Next we have 2 of the Cadian Shock Troop squads. So they are $52 a piece, include 10 models. You're going to have options for a heavy and special weapon, some extra capabilities on your sergeant, but these are going to make up the majority of your boots on the ground. They are 2 OC each, so that's what you're going to be holding your objectives with, and they're going to be doing all your grunt work for the army. And next we have our Armored or Scout Sentinel. So the single kit builds either one of these options. The Armored Sentinel is a little more durable and packs a little bit more punch, as where the Scout Sentinel is going to be a little more mobile and offers some synergies, buffing your other units, taking away the negatives for using indirect fire. Either one of those a very viable option, but typically I think you see the Scout Sentinel more in most competitive guard lists. The Scout Sentinel kit is currently $45, and either configuration is going to give you a one-shot hunter-killer missile as well. And last but not least, in our existing combat patrol is the Field Ordnance Battery. So you're going to get 2 of these field ordnance weapons. You have 3 different options on how you want to build these. You have the Malleus Rocket, you have the Bombast Field Gun, or you have the Heavy Las Cannon. The Heavy Las Cannon is going to be your best bet for punching through heavy armor. The Malleus Rocket is going to deal with other infantry. And the Bombast Field Gun is a little bit of a dual purpose, but that's going to give you some indirect fire. All of which are pretty decent options, but I think you're going to find typically that the Ordnance and indirect fire from the Bombast Field Gun is going to be your best option of these. So if we just do the math on this, we're going to have $45 for the command squad, $52 times 2 for the Cadian squads, $45 for the Sentinel, and then $58 for the bombast field guns. So if we're going to total all of those up, it would come out to $252 worth of individual kits in the existing combat patrol for the Astra Militarum. So with the current price of $168 for the combat patrol, that's going to give you about a 34% savings over MSRP, which is a little bit on the high side for savings in the combat patrols that are currently offered from Games Workshop. It's definitely not the best, but it's also definitely not the worst. Now a quick word from today's sponsor, CMO Games. CMO Games carries a full range of Games Workshop products including miniatures, paint, terrain, tools, and more. They take pre-orders for most Games Workshop new releases as early as possible, usually 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. CMO Games offers 15% off of MSRP for most all Games Workshop products and offer fast free shipping to the continental United States on orders over $50. Most orders ship out within 24 hours. You know their customer service is top-notch as they've been selling games online for over 20 years. Use the affiliate link below and let them know that Warhammer Man sent you. And then moving on from there, let's check out the contents of the new combat patrol that's going to be offered and take a look at that. So once again, you're going to have the Cadian command squad for $45. That's going to be your HQ. Unfortunately, in the new box set, you're not going to be able to attach this to any of the units in the new combat patrol, which is definitely going to make for awkward play, as these 5 models are pretty fragile on their own, and the HQ itself is pretty important to issue out your orders. So if you leave these guys exposed, they're going to die very easily and expose a massive weak point in your army. Next, we have a squad of the Kasrkins. This is a $65 kit. It is 10 models, and the Kasrkins are much more of like an elite infantry as opposed to like your typical Cadians. You're going to have the option to take multiple special weapons. They have the ability to deep strike, a better armor save, and these are much more of like a scalpel type unit for the Astra Militarum. And then finally, we have 2 units of the Aquillin Rough Riders. So these are the mobile cavalry units for the Astra Militarum. They are quick. They can do quite a bit of damage with their different lance weapons. They have the ability for like the Malta Lance. They're also decent in combat compared to your overall units in the Astra Militarum. So they're going to be able to do a decent amount of actual punch on the charge. They can take out vehicles, they can take out like medium infantry, and because they're on horseback, they're actually pretty mobile. Now that being said, because they're a mounted unit, they're going to have to go around terrain, which means if you leave them concealed, a lot of their movement is going to be used actually going around terrain pieces, as opposed to things like infantry that can freely move through it as if it wasn't there. Each of those Aquillin Rough Rider squad is going to come out to $62.50. So if we just total up the MSRP value of the new combat patrol that's going to be offered, we have $45 for the command squad, $65 for the Kasrkins, and then $62.50 twice for the Aquillin Rough Riders. So that's going to come out to $235, which is about a 29% discount over MSRP. So the new combat patrol is going to have about $235 worth of MSRP inside of it. The old combat patrol was $252 worth of MSRP inside it. So dollar for dollar, you're getting about $17 less in the new combat patrol. So it is less value for sure, about 10% over the previous one. And while a lot of people weren't a big fan of the old combat patrol and its composition as it was missing like a big heavy hitter tank, I honestly think that the old combat patrol composition was better than this one. Not being able to attach the Cadian command squad to another unit is going to be a big weakness in this army, as anytime your opponent can get to them, they're easily going to die, and then that's going to leave you without orders, so you have to be very careful not to leave them exposed. While you'll still have some speed and mobility with the Rough Riders, they're much less common in competitive lists than something like the Sentinel. And while the mobility and special weapons of the Kasrkins is definitely a nice little touch, it's been quite a while since we've seen them in competitive lists. More often than not, you're going to see Tempestus Science or the brand new Tempestus Aquillins filling that role with either some of their nice special abilities or volume of fire coupled with lethal hits, doing much more damage and getting the job done. So overall, while I'm a big fan of the actual new models in this new combat patrol, I think the actual composition is much worse than the previous one. I think the old Astra Militarum Combat Patrol was actually a really nice start to most Astra Militarum armies. And while realistically the field guns aren't necessarily the most optimized choice, they actually do pretty good on the table. They're pretty cheap, they offer you a decent amount of heavy hitting firepower with the las cannons, the Meleus rocket launcher is decent for clearing chaff, and the bombast field gun, while not optimal, still has some pretty decent indirect fire. And coupled with the Scout Sentinel, that's going to give you the ability to ignore a lot of the negatives of not being able to see your target with the indirect fire rules, stack some of the buffs with the various stratagems. But I think by far the most important thing about the new Combat Patrol versus the old Combat Patrol is neither one of them has an individual character, but at least in the old Combat Patrol, the Cadian Command Squad has the ability to attach to one of the Cadian units, which is going to give them much more survivability. One of the most important Astra Militarum stratagems in the existing codex is going to allow you to recycle one of your units when it dies. So more often than not, you're going to be bringing back your Sentinel for one more use with that, or in the new Combat Patrol, bringing back the Kasrkins or the Rough Riders. So while I don't necessarily think the new Combat Patrol is bad, I do think that it's worse. You get less models, you get less value, and you get less synergy within the units. And I'm not really sure what Games Workshop was going for with the new Combat Patrol. It may have some nice new rules that are going to make it actually pretty good in the actual Combat Patrol itself. But if you're looking to get started in Combat Patrol and then build up into a full-size Astra Militarum 2,000-point army, I really think the new Combat Patrol feels like a downgrade. So now that we've compared the value, the composition, and the two Combat Patrols to each other, what about if you already have the existing Combat Patrol or you're thinking about picking it up as it's going away soon, and then maybe adding in the new Combat Patrol as well? I think realistically, the two Combat Patrols go pretty well together. You would essentially have two 10-man units of the Cadians. You could attach a command squad to each of them. You have the Scout or Armored Sentinel to give a little bit of extra punch. You would have your field guns for either heavy las cannon hitting power or indirect fire. You would have two squads of Attilan Rough Riders or one big squad of 10 of them, which would be really good to recycle when they do die. It's going to give you a little bit of extra mobility and the ability to punch through some tanks or heavy infantry. And then you have one unit of the Kasrkins as well. They can deep strike in and take an objective or kill a key unit. So I think overall the two Combat Patrols would pair with each other very nicely. And then assuming after those two Combat Patrols you're going to build up to a full 2,000-point force, I think adding in Lord Solar Leontis is an absolute must. He could attach to one of your big infantry squads, he's going to give you extra command points, and he's able to issue out 3 different orders to 3 different units that are close by, and there's no restrictions, so he can order anything from infantry to vehicles. And he is an absolute staple of any Astra Militarum list. And then the next step from there is adding in some of the Astra Militarum staple battle tanks. I personally like the Leman Russ. It's one of the best chassis in the game. It has a high toughness, high wound count, nice armor save, and there's a bunch of different variants that can be built from a single kit. You can build the standard Leman Russ kits, or you can build the tank commander who has the ability to shoot on death, which is a very powerful ability, allowing him to take something with him when he does get blown up. He can also issue orders to other tanks nearby or himself, and more often than not, any Imperial Guard list that you see out there is going to have at least the tank commander and probably a couple more Leman Russes as well. The Rogaldorn is also another really nice option. A little bit more durable, it has the ability to blank 1 damage roll per game. It's a little more survivable than your typical Leman Russ, and it does have some pretty good punch as well. You can round out the list with a lot of other different options, maybe some more indirect fire, maybe just fill it out with Leman Russes, but it's pretty evident at this point that any Astra Militarum list out there should be including some Tempestus Science and Tempestus Aquillins. It's very common to see a squad of 10 Tempestus Science with a Tempestus Science command squad equipped as well, all of which can be built from the Tempestus Science kit. That would give you a 15-man squad. You'll be able to recycle it once per game. Unfortunately, the command squad itself wouldn't come back, so you would just get the 10 base Scions. But with their ability to pump out a ton of shots, take a bunch of special weapons, on top of your army rule to get lethal hits against infantry, these guys can punch through just about anything on the game. They have a really good Overwatch threat opportunity, which means you can drop them in, shoot and kill something important, and then your opponent has to freeze in their tracks, or if they move, you're going to be hitting on 6s, getting lethal hits, and potentially deleting a second unit for a single command point. And then finally, we have the brand new unit for the Astra Militarum, the Tempestus Aquillins. Unfortunately, they're not available for sale individually at the moment. They're only included in the Hivestorm box set, but the rules data sheet for them is free. They have some really cool abilities. They can drop outside of 3 inches, not restricted to the normal 9-inch deep strike. They have a decent little bit of punch, and a special rule that allows them to drop in from deep strike 3 inches away, and more often than not, you're seeing the flamer equipped on their little droid that goes with them, and he can shoot immediately when they arrive, and then shoot once again during the normal shooting phase, meaning these guys are excellent for taking your opponent's home objective, clearing off some cheap chaff, or just dropping in the way to stop a charge using the rapid ingress stratagem. So overall, I think the Astra Militarum are in a really good place right now. They are definitely very competitive. We got a new detachment coming in December for all of the factions in the game, which is going to massively shake up the meta. We also have the new Death Corps of Krieg box set coming out soon as well. Probably early 2025, we're going to see the new range refresh as well as a brand new codex for the Astra Militarum. So definitely a lot of excitement for the Astra Militarum, the new Combat Patrol, the new codex, all of the new Krieg units, alongside this brand new Tempestus Aquillins unit. And honestly, I don't think there's been a better time to be an Astra Militarum player. And if you've ever been interested in the army, but needed that final push to collect one of your own, with the new codex and multiple new box sets on the way, I think 2025 is going to be the year of the Imperial Guard. So let me know what you think of the old Combat Patrol, the new Combat Patrol, what you've seen from the Krieg units. Are you an existing player? Are you looking to get into the faction? Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. And as always, special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the channel. Check out the link in the description to save 15% on most Games Workshop products. And make sure to tell them that Warhammer Man sent you. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.